And this is the review of The Power of Kroll, the fifth story of the 16th season of classic Doctor Who, starring Tom Baker as the fourth Doctor. The Power of Kroll is the 102nd story overall, it's 4 parts long, and it's written by Robert Holmes. This story is also the fifth and penultimate story of the Key to Time storyline, and the plot for this of The Power of Kroll is as follows. Searching for the fifth segment of the Key to Time, the Tracer brings the TARDIS to treacherous swamps on the third moon of the planet Delta Magna. The Doctor and Romana soon uncover a plot to wipe out the Swampies, the local inhabitants, by the duplicitous crew of a gas refinery. Meanwhile, a massive creature is stirring beneath the waters, and the primitive Swampies believe the only way to calm the powerful monster is human sacrifice. Power of Kroll, in my opinion, it's a crap story. Sorry to those that like it, but The Power of Kroll I have to say is Tom Baker's worst story at this point in time of my reviews. But it is definitely the worst story Robert Holmes has written for Doctor Who. Yes, I know the Space Pirates and the Crotons are there, but I think the Croton is actually enjoyable. And the Space Pirates, it does have a plot, but it's just, and unfortunately, has padded out because the Doctor and his companions weren't there. But it is rare to put Robert Holmes and the worst story in the same sentence. That's because how much of a good writer he is, and obviously, you're only as good as your last story, and that's the case for Robert Holmes. The production was okay, mainly shot on location with the swampy settings, which wasn't bad in my opinion, but it was a bit too distracting because because you could obviously see that I think it was part of the script. It was just I don't know, just obviously the actors trying to push all the weeds out, and it was just it was all. I mean, obviously I like the setting, but it's just I think it would have worked better if it was like done in studio instead of just doing it in a swamp of some sorts. And obviously doing some places on location, but I think the main swamp area should have just been filmed in the studio instead. Now I don't know why, maybe because of the money but I just think it would have worked a lot better because if they did it for Planet of Evil and that was superb, but obviously here was just not good. And some even the refinery set was good, but the Swampies main base was just it was too dark and it wasn't very good. It wasn't just good, and even the Doctor said he didn't like the architecture, and then the person should be sacked. And the irony is that the set designer for this story was told never to work for Doctor Who again. The script was actually quite good. There are some good moments. It does have some themes of obviously genocide and all the religious fanatical stuff. But the direction by Norman Stewart was pretty lackluster. The special effects were just bad for 70s BBC standards, and whenever a Kroll appeared on the swamp, it was painfully obvious that there was a split screen between where the Kroll emerged and the swamp area. And I think this was due to the location cameraman not knowing how to use the split screen and other matter facts. So the visual departments pretty much had to fix it, and it was just it could have been salvaged to be honest. Although Kroll itself was quite impressive, and I did like the special effect of how it was attacking the refinery, and how one of its tentacles was just dangled over the other side of the refinery. It was quite impressive to say the least. I think that's another plus of one of the rare pluses in this story. The costuming was odd to say the least. I personally would have gone for this option, but it was just a bit strange to be honest. I'm not good at the same time, and the swampies basically were actors just covered in green, are wearing some form of underwear and had some braided wig on their heads, and the refinery workers are just wearing the most generic futuristic outfit there. I do think a lot of effort could have been done for them, but you can't complain really. The plot was actually alright, but it was very evident that Robert Holmes didn't really put enough effort into the story, as he wasn't really a big fan of big monster stories, and he's even gone on record and saying that The Power of Kroll is his least favorite story he's ever written, and this is what pretty much caused him not to write for Doctor Who for at least until the end of the Peter Davison era, which was another several years is after the story aired. The fifth segment itself actually turned out to be Kroll because it swallowed the segment, and because it swallowed the segment, it pretty much grew to that size anyway. right? And then there was the theme of like genocide being pretty much sponsored by, encouraged slash sponsored by small companies, and obviously the primitives, the swampies, being protected by like a snowflake. Okay, maybe I'm using the wrong words for me saying snowflake, but like environmentalist companies like the Sons of Earth industry, like they were pretty much like protecting the swampies. So they were pretty much against what the refinery people were doing, so to speak. In terms of memorable moments, not many because this story was a bit dull, but I did like the part one cliffhanger where Romano was about to be sacrificed to Kroll, even though it was just one of the swampies. I think it was. I'll get to it later. I think I'll have to look up that swampy's name because it was basically a swampy in the costume trying to like claw at Romano, and she was basically like screaming. And as much as it pretty much put Romano in like a down and distress sort of situation, but I did actually kind of like the before the sacrifice just chanting crow, 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 and the like the rhythmic beats as well. It reminds me of King Kong for some reason. I also like how the Doctor was able to pretty much defeat the Crow by attaining the segment, and the Doctor pretty much realized that in part four, because when he realized that the Crow was the fifth segment, so and I like the little moment where the Doctor reminded Romana can like manifest itself into any form, and Romana pretty much had like a light bulb in her head, and that was a nice scene. Speaking of the Doctor Romana, there was a scene in part two when they were reading through. They found a book of the history of Kroll. Oh, I actually saw that prop in the Doctor Who shop in London a couple of weeks before the first lockdown. I went to that. I think it was called the Doctor Who shop, and obviously I had this like TV museum of like all like the costumings, the props, and stuff like that. And obviously that book was there. So there, and in that book it was written like the first. I actually read the book, and it was just the first bit was just about how Crow was, and then other part, and then it just went off into like complete nonsense, talking about weddings, and I think underwear, if memory recalls correctly, because the camera showed the Doctor and Romana reading the book, but it didn't actually show the contents of the book itself. Watching The Power of Kroll back after my visit to Doctor Who shop 2 years ago, it is quite a fun thing to think about on a date. Think about, to be honest. To the acting of the story, it was rather good, but it's a shame that the acting couldn't really save the story overall. It did a bit, but not entirely. Tom Baker was good with what he was given, but obviously it wasn't enough to save the story. Like, he always had a few funny comments, especially when he and Romano were captured by the Swampies in part two, and obviously Romano had met the Swampies before, and he told Romano to like make him sound impressive but not over exaggerate. And Romano was about to say something, and then they they pretty much just capture him. They pretty much just captured him, and the Doctor was like, "I told you not to exaggerate." And I also liked the part when the Doctor was like pretty much playing on like the flute or something whilst Romano was getting kidnapped. That was like the start of the story. That was quite funny. And Mary Tam did a good job as well, but obviously she had fuck all to do in the story, and that was a shame because I think she was just a background character just after she was just rescued in part two. And it was pretty frustrating for her to see after she pretty much contributed to like the plot of other previous stories like Stones of Blood, Pirate Planet, Rebus Operation, those sorts of stories. But I did like the bit when the Doctor and Romana when they returned to the refinery, and the Doctor needed to like stop the rocket, and then they approached the silo, and then the Doctor was like Doctor and Romana were pretty much talking, saying that if anything happens, it's we best to just say goodbyes now, and then they just said goodbye, Doctor, and goodbye, Romana. That was a sweet scene. K9 doesn't appear in the story, but due to the swamps not being suitable for K9, but it's even mentioned in the story. But obviously, I don't think K9 would have actually contributed a whole lot. I mean, he probably would have shot down some swampies, or he probably would have even stunned like one of the refinery workers. But hey, yeah. And the side characters, they were very meh. Nothing really special about them. They were just there. First off, we had Romdant. He was a gunrunner that was sent to supply arms to the Swampies by the Swampies of Delta 3. He was actually hired by Thorn to give them the guns, not the Sons of Osgroup as initially suspected. But the guns he gave weren't good, so he was pretty much almost killed by the zombies along. He was almost killed by the zombies along with the Doctor reminded by that with that torture thing, so to speak. But he was later killed by Kroll when he saw Kroll and he tried to move, but then the Kroll literally just dragged him and just drowned him. He was an alright side character, and I think I preferred him in comparison to like the other side characters in the story, so to speak. Well, him and Dugeen, but we'll get to him later. And then you also have Fenner. He works in the refinery along with Dugeen and Hog under Thorn. And obviously, he didn't like the Swampies because he didn't like the Swampies. He didn't really care much of them, and it was pretty much obvious how he treated the other Swampy that was there working for the Mensch. But then he obviously told Thorn that he didn't like the Swampies, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he hates them. And Thorn pretty much responded that he hates them regardless. He wants them all dead, and I kind of liked that scene. See, I kind of like the prejudice feel of this. That how and I liked how Thorn was like prejudiced against like the Swampies. But I'll get to that a little bit later. We also had Dugeen. He was another worker in the refinery. He stood up to Thorn in favor of the swamp, in favor of like not killing the Swampies, but it ended up him getting killed. He's played by John Leeson, who does the voice of K9, and it was nice that John Leeson actually like stepped up to play Dugeen because I think the original actor who was supposed to play Dugeen was unavailable, so he pretty much stepped in. Obviously, K9 could have been in the story, so yeah, it was a good thing. And I really liked this character, and I wish he kind of interacted with the Doctor. Hog, another refinery worker, he was killed by the Kroll in part 2, and Mensch, he was a swampy that was basically like the servant for the refinery, and he later gets killed by Kroll. And we have the Swampies. We have Varric, the Swampy chief that pretty much reported to Rankin. He started doubting Kroll when stuff started going wrong, but Rankin didn't hear anything of the story. He ends up surviving, and Scott, he was the Swampy that was dressed up as Kroll to try and kill Romana, but he ended up getting knocked out by the Doctor. But then he told Rankin of what happened, and then promised that they will get the sacrifices will definitely be made. The enemies of this story. First off, we have Thorn. He was the leader of the refinery, and he basically hired Ramzat to arm the Swampies with guns. So he pretty much, in order to like give justification as to why they killed the Swampies, so to make it as if that the Swampies are actually threatening the humans, and then obviously they didn't get away with the refinery work. And now pretty much justified why he wanted to kill the Swampies. He hated the Swampies simply because they're primitives, and he killed Dugeen and because he didn't believe in the plans of wanting to kill the Swampies. And I kind of like that scene how he was like pretty much standing up saying I'm refusing because of like moral grounds, and obviously Dugeen gets killed and he starts thinking that Dugeen was a plant sent by the Sons of the Earth. But even though that even wasn't the case, he just didn't want to kill the Swampies because he wasn't right. Right, and ironically, and the irony is that he gets killed by a Swampy with a spear. He was an alright villain, but the thing is, genocide villains we've actually seen several times before in Dog 2, and it was getting a bit dull seeing this again. Plus, we don't exactly have a reason as to why Thorn hated the Swampies and why he wanted them dead. They simply, I think, obviously they wanted to do it because he was prejudiced against them, but we never explained what caused the prejudice. Why does he hate the Swampies? Was he in love with a Swampy at some point, or did the Swampy kill his dad, brother, whatever? It was just there. I think they could have at least added something as to why he hated the Swampies. And the other villain was Rankin. He was the leader of the Swampies. He wasn't as evil as Thorn, but he was very much akin to like a cult leader or like one of those evil religious leaders. So not evil, like a morally wrong religious leader, because he was a threat towards the Doctor and to the Doctor and Romana. He even threatened to sacrifice them to Kroll. He even accused Varlik of freeing the Doctor, Romana, and Ramzat when they were about to be like sacrificed. But even the Doctor used that scream, and then obviously he's dead because the reason why he fought so was because Varlik disagreed and started doubting Kroll in the first place. And I like the irony of his death because he was killed by Kroll, the very one he worshipped, and that was pretty ironic, so to speak. And I kind of liked how freaking oblivious this man was. And obviously, when Rankin and Co reached the refinery, and obviously Kroll was pretty much like attacking the base, and then he started praying, and then obviously, they started turning the machinery on. They turned the machinery on, and then Kroll into it, and then Rankin was like, "Oh, Kroll was answering my prayers," and then someone told Kroll it was just, I think it was Volex, and Kroll went to it was simply because of the machinery. Yeah, it was quite a funny scene. And finally, the final villain was Kroll. Kroll was a giant squid that was brought to Delta 3 by the humans. It ate the key to time segment, which caused it to grow, and it ate one of the priests. It hunted by sensing vibration, killed a lot of people. I do think Kroll was a bit of an uninspired villain. I think it was just another failed attempt of having a big Doctor Who villain to try and get popular, but it was just I think Kroll was just memorable for like all the wrong reasons, to my opinion. And to the main fault of the story, other than the rack production and the shoddy-ish writing and not enough characterization for some of the side characters, and obviously Ronan not doing much, I think the main problem the story has is the bloody pacing. It dragged from start to finish. There were a lot of stuff that I've seen in Doctor Who several times before, and I think it was just cliched, and just Robert Holmes could have honestly done something new to try and juice up the story, even though he didn't want like a big monster. I think he just half-assed the story, in my opinion. And obviously, I think a main example of this was Thorne's character. Like obviously, like he was like the leader of the refinery, doesn't believe what was going on, and obviously he had a bit of prejudice, unjustified prejudice for no reason, which leads him to kill, and would be willing to kill others who pretty much stood up against him, such as Dagin. And also another part I didn't really like about the story is how Romana again, she pretty much gets kidnapped. And in the first 5 minutes of this story, and then she pretty much spends most of it in captivity, and the part one cliffhanger is her pretty much in peril, which is just dull again, because I've lost count of how many times we've seen Romana in peril, especially in the last story where she was kidnapped. She freed herself, but then she ends up getting kidnapped a few minutes afterwards. And obviously, I think another part I did not like in the story was when Dr. Romana and Ramdot are about to be executed by the Swampies, and they're obviously tied up in this vine room. And then I can't remember. I think the explanation was a bit shoddy. I didn't really get it, but then I think the vines tightening would have like snapped their spine, so to speak. So they obviously escaped by the Doctor producing some form of a sonic scream that shatters glass. And he said he learned it in the party trick, but then he doesn't even learn it again. I mean, we never even see it again, and it was very random. And I don't understand why he didn't do it why he didn't do it before, why he had to do it when the storm was approaching. And I just think that part was just obvious filler. And most of the scenes in the final were just everyone staring to the systems of Rain Kroll or just watching the screen over the rocket countdown. So to conclude, I think The Power of Kroll is a very dull story that nobody liked and nobody wanted, and it's a shame that Robert Holmes was pretty much forced to write the story. But I do think that he could have put a bit more effort into the story, considering the fact that he is one of the greatest Doctor Who writers. But at the end of the day, you're just as good as your last story, no matter who you are. So The Power of 3 gets a 3 out of 10. So my next review will be the final story of The Key to Time, the Armageddon Factor. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already, and follow me on the social media sites listed in the description box below. Until then, see you later.